Thanks, Nelson. Afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So I'm Emma Leonis. I am the Executive Director of HR Transformation at Lace Partners. For those of you who don't know about Lace Partners, we're a boutique HR transformation consultancy in the UK, and we work with organisations to look at their HR operating models, look at their HR technology, implementing that, for example, and also work with them to manage change and adoption. I'm personally really passionate about HR and the value that it can drive to support an organisation. I kind of see HR really as the lifeblood of the businesses that we work in and at the heart of everything that we do. And I'm sure I'm not alone in my view on that. When I ask people, and by that I mean my clients in HR, also my HR colleagues, sort of what they think around our capability as a function and what we're doing and how we're doing that, what's quite interesting is that the response tends to be, yeah, we're doing okay. So, we're making progress, be that in terms of simplifying ways of working. Maybe we are looking at the moments that matter for our employees and starting to differentiate the employee experience based on priorities. And we might be building capability as well. And that's fantastic. But I think what's interesting is whether we're doing that at the speed that's required to support the leadership challenges and the wider economic challenges that we're facing in general, but also more and more at the moment. Obviously, we talk a lot about the challenges that we face in HR. I could have a whole session just on that, and I'm not going to do that. So capability, do we get the investment that we need? What about line manager capability? But actually what was quite interesting when I was just thinking about what to talk about today was I had a bit of a revelation. When I think about what probably is the biggest barrier to our success, actually, perhaps it is our own mindset. Hence, are we our own worst enemy? And I just wanted to take a little bit of time today to reflect on that and maybe provide some words of thought, encouragement, and a bit of a call to arms, I guess, to do things perhaps a little bit differently. So first of all, if we maybe just have a look at these questions and just ask yourself some of the following. When was the last time that you actually said no when you were pushed on something? When you're challenged, how often do you revert back to your comfort zone? There's so much noise in the business. How often do you actually automatically just say, yep, I'll go and help with that? In HR, we always want to do the right thing. Maybe we need to sometimes actually stop and push back a little bit. And quite interestingly, maybe just reflect on the language that we use when we talk about what we do and the value that we bring. So I asked myself those questions when I was preparing for today, and I sort of went, okay, actually, maybe I need to also think about this myself. And as I say, I'm not here to critique the function. I'm super passionate about HR. What I'd actually like to do now is maybe just to share a few thoughts on how we can step up and be a little bit spikier. I recognise it's not easy, but I think there are a few things that we can do, maybe start small with some of these tips and actually start to make a change. So the first thing, I suppose, for me, if I was to give you some advice, would be, let's be bold. We need to really be resolute and ruthless here. So when the noise comes, what are those three things based on the business plan and therefore the people plan that you're really going to focus on? They need to be your non-negotiables because they're the things that will drive employee experience, drive employee engagement, and ultimately drive success for the business. In addition, we also, I think, need to stop looking for appellation and recognition. I personally believe that CEOs and business leaders actually do understand the value that HR can bring and the role that HR can play in an organisation. We won that debate. I actually think what they're probably questioning is our ability to deliver. And some of that might be actually down to the way that we talk about what we do and the language that we use. When you look at marketing by its nature is fantastic about its own PR. Perhaps we need to do a little bit more of that ourselves as well and start using the right language to celebrate some of the successes that we have. And by being resolute and ruthless, that's also going to enable us to free up the capacity that we need to focus on the things that we want to do. We talk a lot, I think, about HR becoming more strategic. We can only do that if we have the capacity to stop being pulled into the weeds. Point number two, so tip number two would be trying to step outside of your comfort zone. Easier said than done, I recognise, particularly given that our natural tendency, I think, is to revert back to what we're comfortable with when we're faced with challenge or faced with ambiguity. But, we now need to really think about how we start to drive competitive differentiation. Businesses are expecting us to build the leadership of the future, to make sure that we hire the right individuals, that we retain the critical talent, that we really do create an experience that's a wow for our employees. And we can only do that if we start to move away from the traditional norms of conformity and compliance. So, the process piece, data, governance, etc. And that's going to be a difficult challenge, I think, for us, because it's not our nature to do that. More and more, I think we need to be comfortable working with ambiguity. Change is the new norm. Change is everywhere. It's okay, actually, not to know everything. It's okay to have questions. Sometimes I think we feel we should have all the answers because we're there to support the business. But it's fine if we don't have all of those answers, and let's not put too much pressure on ourselves too. And also, for me, I think here there's something around reskilling and upskilling. So this links back to my point around starting to step away from our comfort zone. I think we're only going to be able to do that if we really look at ourselves as a function critically and say, have we got the right skills around consulting, around solution design? And that applies not just to business partners, not just to specialists, not just to shared services. It applies to every part of the HR function. I think we have a real opportunity here to step up and do something a little bit different. And my third tip would be that we need to start leading business transformation. So, as you can see, start acting as a strategist or architect of business value. So for me, that starts with what's our overall business strategy? What does that then mean in terms of our people plan associated with that? How does that then translate into our HR specific priorities? And how do we know that we've then delivered success? How do you measure return on investment, for example? And how do we become more commercial? And part of that, I think, will come if, as we build our new leaders in the function, we encourage them to spend more time in the business, walk the walk and talk the talk. And then finally, becoming the catalyst of change. This for me is a really big one, particularly now as well. So for me, there's something here around starting to shift our focus from the immediacy, and again, back to that comfort zone, to thinking about what's coming next, being a little bit more predictive, a bit more proactive. And I recognise that particularly right now in our current situation, that is quite challenging because we've got to focus on the now. But at the same time, I'm ever the optimist. We will get through the current situation, and therefore, as HR leaders and HR practitioners, we do need to keep an eye on how we enable our organisations to start thriving once we've got through the reaction activities and the sort of supporting activities that we might be focusing on at the moment. So starting to just think a little bit more around how do we start to learn from the lessons of today's current environment? How do we also think about going back to BAU, etc.? Challenging the status quo and being curious. This for me is a really big one, asking why are we doing that? Have you thought about X, Y, Z, and starting to instill that culture in our teams? And some of that also, I think, is around us starting to say that data trumps opinions. There's so much data now in organisations, and HR is starting to use it more and more, needs to get better at doing so. But particularly if we've got that data, what is it telling us, and how can we use that to challenge the status quo? And finally here, for me, there is also something about stopping the inertia that we, for some reason, seem to have as a function. I personally think that sometimes we are afraid of failure. We probably all are individually, but as a function in particular, HR, I think, is afraid of failure. And it's okay to fail, as much as it's okay not to know all the answers to the questions. I think we just sometimes need to just go with, we know what the right thing is to do. Let's be bold, let's go ahead, and let's actually do that and make a difference. So finally, just thinking about all of that, I genuinely believe the future does belong to HR if we challenge ourselves like never before. It's not going to be easy to do all of the things that I've just said there. Changing mindset is probably the hardest thing to change. It's easy to change a structure in an organisation comparatively. It's easier to build capabilities. It's easier to change processes. But mindset is such a personal thing that I think it will be difficult, but we can do it. And to reiterate what Bob said at the start of the session today, we genuinely can't stand still. And I think particularly in the environment that we're in right now, this is the function's biggest opportunity to really step up and to make a real difference and support the organisation.